Welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from the unapologetic perspective of the Hoosier left. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm recording from Bloomington. If you're watching on YouTube, that's my co-host Kilo the Botzer behind me. This week, we're reviewing the 2024 Indiana primary, which took place last Tuesday. I will look at how Friends of the Pod fared on election night, analyze the unpredictable Monroe County Commissioners' Battle Royale, with commentary on the statewide contests for governor and United States Senate. We are going to bounce around the state, peeking in on each congressional district and notable statehouse races. Turnout was once again dismal. Nearing 20 years of one-party rule, Republicans having drawn themselves into a near insurmountable supermajority, with declining quality of life outcomes for Hoosiers, it is understandable for the population to feel helpless, like our voices and our votes don't matter. I will try to hammer home again and again in this episode and over the course of the next 6 months that we must turn out in November if we want better. We can turn out. We do deserve better. Billionaire donors will spend vast sums in the coming months to convince those in the center to succumb to fear, and those of us on the left to succumb to apathy. But there is always hope. There must always be hope. This is why we fight. And in a way, that is why I have undertaken the Who's Left project. In 2022, in the wake of the corrupted Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, I was furious on behalf of the women in my life, in this state, and across the country. The rushed special session of the General Assembly that summer was the first time I had participated in a political protest. I had spent my whole adult life squandering the privilege I have in this society as a straight white man. I knew I needed to do more, but wasn't quite sure what that looked like. I didn't know anybody in political circles. My time was consumed by work and family. So I started writing on Substack in what little spare time I had. I've branched into campaign finance research and started this podcast because the world needs more basic white guys with podcasts. But seriously, this place has been my way of climbing the nearest hill and shouting, "I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore." And you, as a Hoosier or a citizen of any captured, gerrymandered red state, should be just as mad. We should be mad together and turn our righteous fury into action. 2024 has proven to be an incredibly difficult year, which I was expecting, but not like this. In January, my special character, my guy, my 19-year-old son passed away. We're all still a wreck, and his 16-year-old sister is not coping well and is getting up to 16-year-old shit. And on top of all that, did I mention that an uncomfortable number of our neighbors would sacrifice our country, the one that invented modern liberal democracy, the one whose founders they worship as demigods, the one my grandfather and his generation fought to keep from the grip of fascism? Our home. They would give it up to the false religion of Christian nationalism. So yeah, 2024, hell of a timeline, huh? You know, for a couple months after my son passed, I was simultaneously paralyzed by grief and driven to help ensure that other parents would never know that pain in the only way I know how, because I don't know how to people. I'm good at seeing things from 30,000 feet, but I struggle with, actual human interaction. Anybody else? Am I the only weirdo? I doubled down on Who's Left in an effort to shed more light on Indiana politics, where our far-right Republican supermajority and their financial benefactors enact policies that literally harm our children by allowing guns to flood our communities, by bullying queer youth, and by poisoning our environment, or by driving the next generation out of state entirely with their apocalyptic worldview. I didn't take on any work outside of this project for a few months there, and so many of you have been so supportive. The subscriber base has grown. We just hit our 1,000th subscriber on Substack. I'm humbled and honored to know that there is a core of you who believe enough in me to give financial support. I've been able to publish more frequently, learn new skills, and expand beyond audio into video. But at this time, it's not sustainable full-time, so I've had to put on the Carhartt, or the generic version, because that shit's expensive. Once again, scraping and sanding, priming, painting, trimming and mulching, and working on this project whenever I can. I'd much rather devote my working time to this and to you, but I can only give this project the attention it truly deserves with your help. I will continue to work to highlight Indiana's bad actors so we can replace them with more empathetic leadership and also shine the spotlight on the activists, organizations, and elected officials who are doing the hard work to build a more just, equitable, and compassionate Indiana for the next generation of Hoosiers. And I will take on Democrats too, as you will see in this episode, when they put their donors over their voters, when they talk out of both sides of their mouths, and when they fail to push back against GOP authoritarian extremism with the necessary urgency and tenacity. Remember this: the party is a tool we can use to help achieve our goals. It serves us. We do not serve it. I will go deep to provide information and analysis you won't get anywhere else in the Hoosier state. I am not motivated by the dollars, but everything costs money. Web hosting, editing software, travel to meet with other activists and organizers. With the jump to video, I needed to upgrade my computer, and that wasn't cheap. But even more valuable is time. More support from you, dear listeners, means more time to devote to Who's Left, to more content. So, if you can, help me out with a paid subscription at scottaaronrogers.substack.com. For $5 a month or $50 a year, you can help me push our state in a better direction and maybe help keep me from coming down with a severe case of drywaller's elbow. And while the best way to help this project is a financial contribution, if you can't afford it at this time, you can still help. Subscribe at the free level over on Substack. Set your favorite podcast player to auto-download new episodes of the show. Rate and review the show on iTunes or whatever platform you use. Follow me on social media at facebook.com/HoosLeft. That's HOOS left. I'm also on Blue Sky at the same handle. On Instagram, Threads, and Twitter, I'm at ScottRog78. That is SCOTTROG78. And on Mastodon at ScottRog78 at Hoosier.social. If you want to see my face or the occasional photobomb from a puppy, I'm posting full video episodes of the pod on YouTube and clips on TikTok. The handle on both of those is at Who's Left. Please subscribe to any and all. But most importantly, share our message. Forward the articles to friends, family, and colleagues. Don't just like, but share on social media. Invite others to this community of Indiana leftists. Nobody is coming to save us. We've got to do it ourselves. With your investment, a full-time Who's Left could look like new content every day, full coverage of the 2024 election cycle in Indiana and beyond, and zooming out to see how the networks acting in our state function nationally and even globally. Why am I asking you for money? Because I don't want to read ads for terrible internet therapy or ship a box of stuff to your house subscriptions. And I also don't want any content behind a paywall because, as one of my favorite authors, and once a Hoosier, always a Hoosier, Sarah Kendzior says, it's not cool to paywall political content in a political crisis. I believe in open access to information, and your support helps make this knowledge freely available to all Hoosiers. But I desperately need your contributions in order to keep bringing you all of that sweet, sweet content. So please, before the review of the 2024 Indiana primary, pause right now, go to scottaaronrogers.substack.com and subscribe at the paid level. To those who have contributed already, my sincere thanks, and to everybody, thanks for listening. Now, let's turn to the result of this past Tuesday's primary election. And I want to start right here in Bloomington and Monroe County. I spoke to all 5 Democratic candidates across the 2 abnormally expensive and acrimonious races for county commissioner. If you've been listening to the show, you know I've spent weeks trying to map the fault lines in this rare one-party Democratic county in Indiana. As we've talked about plenty of times before, and we'll surely talk about plenty more throughout the year, if there's one-party rule anywhere in this state, it's almost always Republican. That's why Monroe County makes such an interesting case study. So, in District 2, 3-term incumbent Julie Thomas took on current county council member Peter Iverson. Iverson had a huge fundraising advantage, like 3-to-1, with a lot of support from local businesses, particularly home builders. Yet, Thomas wins this race solidly by 3 points, 51.5 to 48.5. She will go on to win in November. There is currently no Republican in this race. I had no idea Julie Thomas was such a powerhouse. In the other race, her fellow incumbent, Penny Githens, took on 2 opponents, Jody Madera and Steve Volan, in District 3. Now, Githens and Thomas essentially ran together as a block, whereas Madera ran sort of as the business candidate along with Iverson, and Volan stood alone, though, in support of much more housing. So in that race, Madera won 43% with Githens at 33 and Volan at 23. Githens announced during her concession speech that she will retire at the end of her term. Madera will face Republican Joe Van Deventer in the general, who won his primary. And I'll tell you, I had no idea what was going to happen in that race. I had things pegged totally backwards. I thought Iverson, surely with that vast fundraising advantage, his signs all over town, would be able to beat Thomas one-on-one. And I assumed Githens would move on, splitting the change candidate vote. But alas, I had things backwards. Thomas won comfortably. She was running about 10 points ahead most of the night before settling in with that 3-point win. And I had no idea Madera was going to come in. It seems more of a, I don't know, is it a generational thing? Because Madera is younger than the other 2 candidates. It's not the splitting the building vote. I'm still trying to figure out these fault lines in the local Monroe County Democratic Party. If you're a Monroe County listener, send feedback. I'm interested to hear how and why you voted the way you did, and your thoughts on the race and Monroe County politics in general. I did want to briefly talk about the county council here in Monroe County. There were four candidates running for 3 spots in the general election. Incumbents Cheryl Munson and Trent Deckard easily moved on. Monroe County Democratic Party Chairman David Henry edged Matt Caldy for 3rd place, so he will be moving on to the general election. A lot of hats there, my friend. Congratulations to everybody for moving on. So let's zoom out a little bit and look at some of the statehouse races, and we'll work our way up to the big statewide contests. Here in District 62, that's House District 62, my home district, that's Brown County, rural Monroe County, and parts of Jackson County. They gerrymandered the city of Bloomington into its own district. Anyway, friend of the pod, Thomas Horrock, was unopposed in the Democratic primary and will move on to face incumbent Dave Hall, who looks like store-brand Ted Cruz. We'll see him in November. Horrocks is going to win this race. You heard it here first. Moving north a little bit, up in House District 24, which includes much of Hamilton and parts of Boone County, Westfield, Sheridan, parts of Carmel, and Zionsville in this district. The incumbent, Donna Shabley, is retiring. Guest of the show, Josh Lowry, is unopposed, and he will grapple with Republican Hunter Smith in November. And if you recognize that name, Hunter Smith is a former punter for the Colts, which seems to unusually launch guys into positions of prominence. I don't know. Anyway, Smith is now a farmer who owns Wonder Tree Farm in Zionsville, and for a Republican has a remarkably good record on the environment. But do not get Colts nostalgia. Do not confuse Hunter Smith with Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison. Do not let the remarkably decent environmental record fool you. Hunter Smith would still be a vote to defund public schools and continue the culture war garbage in the statehouse. Let's put Josh Lowry there. Good guy, friend of the show. Hope to have him back. Sticking with the number 24. Down in Senate District 24, that is Putnam County and parts of Hendricks. We're talking Greencastle, Danville, Avon. Incumbent John Crane is leaving that seat, and there is a contest between Democrat and former guest here, Veronica Pedrell, a DePaul music professor and awesome transgender trailblazer, was unopposed in her primary, will face former Hendricks County Sheriff Brett Clark in November, who did have an opponent and came out of that race. A couple weeks ago, we talked to Democrat Trish Whitcomb down in House District 69, which is parts of Jackson, Scott, Bartholomew, and Washington counties. We're looking at Seymour, Brownstown, Salem, that area here. Trish is moving on to face MAGA clown Jim Lucas, who had a primary challenger and won by 15 points, which is close for a 10-term incumbent. He took on Brian Sevilla, a Browntown teacher and former West Virginia state delegate who was recently moved to Indiana. Anyway, people are getting tired of Lucas's shit. I think Whitcomb has a remarkably good chance of flipping this seat in November. Stay tuned. Other notable statehouse races with primary challengers, and these are the ones highlighted by the Indy Star. House District 29, part of Hamilton County, Noblesville area. In the Republican primary there, Elena Schonkweiler, a former staffer for Victoria Sparks, won 60-40 over former Hamilton East Public Library Board President, Moms for Liberty ally, book banner, and certified right-wing nutjob, Laura Allerding. We covered the Moms for Liberty phenomena here last year, and thankfully, it looks like their time has passed. They've jumped the shark. People are tired of their shit. Schonkweiler, a little bit of a more traditional conservative here, again, for what that's worth. She will take on Democrat Chris Hardig in November. That was the seat vacated by Chuck Goodrich, who ran against Sparks in the 5th Congressional District primary. We'll talk about that one here in a little bit. Staying around the general Indianapolis area, in House District 90, Southeast Marion County, this is another seat that is being vacated by an incumbent, Mike Speedy. Great name for an Indiana politician, terrible record. Anyway, he ran in the 6th. We'll cover that later. This seat that he's vacating, the Republican primary, was won by Andrew Ireland in a squeaker. This guy is a former deputy attorney general and a Ted Cruz acolyte, a complete all-around MAGA douche, who will face Dominique Davey in the general election, who was also uncontested. In Senate District 35, parts of Hendricks and Marion County, we're looking at Speedway and Plainfield, the southwest side of Indianapolis here. Incumbent Mike Young, who has served in state government for almost 40 years now, survived a serious challenge from 29-year-old real estate banker Philip Clay, winning 55-45. Young has had an interesting couple of years, to say the least. He resigned from the Republican caucus in 2022, right around the time of that year's special session, because fellow Republicans weren't extreme enough on abortion. And mind you, that's when they passed an extreme abortion ban in the state, and he said they weren't extreme enough. Yeah, anyway, that guy, is going to coast right back into office. There is no Democratic challenger in this race. SMH. Also, I very nearly forgot State Senate District 32. This is southeastern Marion and northeast Johnson County. Both candidates were uncontested, but I got to spend a little time with Democratic candidate Katrina Owens. She's been an instructor at Ivy Tech, vice president of administration at the Indiana Black Expo. She has her own consulting firm. Totally has her shit together. Could probably use that around here. Anyway, she is totally going to win this race. No, because she has her shit together, she's a great candidate. There is some great organizing going on up in that district right now. And also because her opponent, Republican Aaron Freeman, totally sucks. This is the guy, and we talked a little bit about him earlier this spring with Indianapolis City Councilman Jesse Brown. Freeman tried to kill the blue line on behalf of his business daddy, car dealer Ray Skillman. Senate District 10. I want to move out of the Indianapolis area and go take a peek up on Michiana here for a second. That's the South Bend on west over to New Carlisle. In that race, the incumbent State Senator David Nagoski easily fought off a primary challenge from St. Joseph County Treasurer Tim Swagger. This race is notable because in April, Indianapolis Star's James Briggs published a story reporting on sexual harassment and stalking allegations leveled by a former employee at his family's plumbing business. I've had my eye on that story since it broke and shared the article in our exclusive chat for paid subscribers over on Substack. That is a pitch, come on over and join us with the paid subscription. And I'm still turning over heads, not yet. I'm still turning over ideas in my head, work and family and a tight recording schedule before the primaries kind of prevented me from saying more on this. But I've still got my eye on Nagoski, and I've got things to say. Swagger totally pounced on the allegations, but they didn't make a difference. The incumbent easily won and is also currently unopposed in November. So that's our incumbents mostly that made it through unscathed. We did have a couple not make it through. In District 13, that's House District 13, Benton, Warren, and parts of Fountain, Jasper, Montgomery, Newton, and Tippecanoe, and White counties, a rural area here. In that district, Republican Sharon Nagel lost to newcomer, veteran, and teacher Matthew Commons. Now, I don't quite have my pulse on why Nagel, a 5-term incumbent, lost this race by 20 points, but Lafayette area journalist and fellow Substacker Dave Bangert suggests this race was all about local control. Seems like maybe Commons painted Nagel as a shill for big business interests. There's a big carbon capture project that she supported up there, which may have been involved in LEAP in some ways. Anyway, if you are from that area outside of Lafayette, House District 13, give me your thoughts. And if you have any other communities that I've missed in this rundown where you think there's an interesting local race, state house, state senate, you got city council, you got county council, whatever. If you're a candidate in one of those races, reach out. We'd love to talk. Anyway, so Commons defeats Nagel, will face Democrat Edward Moyer Jr. in November. Up in the region, Senate District 3, this is Gary, Maryville, Hobart. The incumbent businessman David Vinzant was ousted by Gary City Council member Mark Spencer. It's kind of an unusual situation. Vinzant has only been in office since January, when he was caucused in to replace Eddie Melton, who resigned his Senate seat upon winning the race to become mayor of Gary. Melton supported Spencer in the caucus, which was won by Vinzant. The voters chose Spencer last Tuesday. Spencer is a teacher, artist, musician, arts director for Gary Community Schools. He will face Will Miller, who is chairman of the Gary Republican Party, which is a thing. So that covers the state house races I've taken an interest in. And now we're going to move on up to the congressional district level. let me rant for a second here about how horribly gerrymandered Indiana's congressional district are. Sure, we're a quote-unquote red state. Fine, whatever. But 55-45, 60-40, tops. Yet, our congressional districts are such that Democrats have 2 seats out of 9. I am not a math whiz, but last time I checked, I believe that's 22%, which is nowhere near 45%, where Indiana voters are. So, Republicans have packed Democratic voters into 2 congressional districts. They'll concede the Indianapolis area, and Andre Carson is the congressman there. Shout out to him. He does a great job. The solid progressive. He has been there on the right side recently in all this mess with Israel and Gaza. He easily won his primary. He had 2 opponents, still won like 90% of the vote. He has an opponent. Well, he doesn't quite have an opponent yet for November, because that primary was won by Jennifer Pace, who passed away from a heart attack in March, yet still defeated Catherine Ping by 1 point in the Republican primary. The 7th District GOP will have to caucus in a new candidate there. Libertarian Rusty Johnson. Shut up, Beavis. Rusty Johnson has already qualified for the general election. That's District 7. And the Republicans also generally concede the 1st congressional district of Indiana to Democratic voters. That is the region up there where Democrat Frank Mervan is the incumbent. I'm much less enthusiastic about Mervan than I am about Andre Carson. He's a middle-of-the-road Democrat, number 126 if you go to Progressive Punch and get his, progressive voting score there. Now, he did not have a primary challenger. I worry about a couple things with Mervan, but he is co-chair of the National Prayer Breakfast Foundation, which is an organization with a lot of baggage. I highly suggest you read The Family by Jeff Sharlet. There's also a Netflix documentary by the same name. Good stuff. Anyway, National Prayer Breakfast was run by the Fellowship Foundation until 2023, and Congress sort of took over this prayer breakfast from them. Again, this is an extremist organization. There are still some connections to that organization with the National Prayer Breakfast that I'd wish, Mervan distanced himself from. Anyway, fantastic, fascinating stuff. 2 years ago, he had his closest challenge ever from Jennifer Ruth Green, but she gave Mervan a hell of a run. So this time, his opponent will be Randy Niemeyer, who is a 4th-generation milk hauler, and he will see Niemeyer in November. Now, moving on over to the 2nd congressional district, that's North Central Indiana, South Bend, Michiana, surrounding rural areas. It's a good side district. Incumbent Rudy Yakim is running for re-election. There are worse Republicans out there. He's a 62% rating from Heritage Action. That's a conservative think tank, gives their conservative ratings. The average for a Republican congressman is 72%. So he's not full MAGA, but he still sucks. Anyway, his opponent will be Lori Camp. She is an operations and training manager, as well as the vendor compliance coordinator for Donnell Systems, a small software firm in South Bend. She has served on the South Bend Community Schools Magnet School Task Force, and has been a diving and gymnastics coach with local high schools up there. We've got a libertarian in this race also, William Henry. I'll reach out to Lori Camp, see if we can't get her here on the show. I have previously reached out to Mervyn, going back to him, by the way, and did not hear back. We'll give him another go here, see if we can't get him on before November to explain himself. 3rd District, Northeast Indiana, Fort Wayne and surrounding areas. That is Jim Banks' district. We had some words from Mr. Banks here last week. Banks is resigning to run for Senate, as you probably know. There was a massive field of more than a half dozen Republicans in this primary race, which was won by the former Representative Marlin Stutzman, who previously held the seat from 2010 to 2017. He came in on the Tea Party wave and got up to Tea Party fuckery when he was there, as one does, especially over Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. He ran for Senate in 2016, losing to Todd Young in the primary, and that's why he's not in that seat anymore. Not exactly a runaway here for Stutzman. He received just 24% of the vote in that crowded field, receiving stiff competition from former Fort Wayne mayoral candidate Tim Smith, who had 23%, and former Allen County Judge Wendy Davis, who had 20%. Each of them raised over $1 million. Crowded race. Grant Bucher was in this race. Mike Felker, John Kenworthy, Eric Whalen, Andy Zay. Just a murderer's row of trash candidates also on the Republican side here. Anyway, Stutzman, trying to get back on that congressional gravy train this year, will face Kylie Adolph, who defeated Phil Goss in the Democratic primary with nearly 2/3 of the vote. She is Vice President of Partnerships for Project Lead the Way, an educational nonprofit focused on STEM. She's also been an adjunct professor at the USC School of Education. She earned a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Trine up by Fort Wayne there, got her master's from USC, and also a Global Executive Doctor of Education from USC. This race also has a Libertarian candidate, Jared Lancaster. We're going to try and get a hold of Kylie Adolph here, see if we can't talk to her on the show. And hey, Republican candidates, you're all welcome to come on the show too. I'm going to grill you. This is not, friendly territory, but you're welcome to come. We talk to everybody here. So let's get to the end of the typewriter there at the northern end of the state. We're gonna dig and move down a row and go back over to the western side of the state and drop down a little bit into District 4, which is a massive, mostly rural district, but does contain Lafayette, West Lafayette, and the west suburbs of Indianapolis. Incumbent Jim Baird defeated Charles Bookwalter and John Piper in the Republican primary. got about 2/3 of the vote. He's a little more conservative than Yakim, has a 79% score from Heritage Action. The Democratic candidate in that race will be Derek Holder, a former Marine and paralegal who lives in Martinsville. Please, somebody get this man a better website. You are officially a Democratic nominee for Congress now. It just goes to show how much Indiana Democrats are being hung out to dry by the National Party. It sucks. They don't think we have a chance. We have a chance. Like in the 5th District. This is Hamilton County, you know, the bougie Indianapolis north suburbs there. You've also got Anderson, Muncie, and Marion in this district. Victoria Sparks, the incumbent in this race, wins in a clown car of a primary with 39% of the vote. She had previously signaled she was not running for re-election. So a slew of Republicans jump in this race to try and take that spot. She gets right back in before the deadline. She had 39%, like I said, to Chuck Goodrich's 33. Goodrich spent $4.5+ million of his own money to finish second in this race. He is the CEO of Gaylor Electric. Looked a little bit about their website. They like to use the term merit shop a lot, which, if you ever see it, is a fun euphemism for we don't let unions come in here. Anyway, Sparks, who is Ukrainian-born, but somehow in kissing the MAGA boot, pushed back against funding for Ukraine's war effort against their imperialistic neighbor. Sparks is moving on to face Deborah Pickett, who won the Democratic primary over Ryan Fenninger, earning about 60% of the vote. I don't know much about any of these candidates. Pickett served in the U.S. Army Reserve for a time. She also researched international trade and economic issues for the Hudson Institute, which is a conservative think tank that had spun off from the Rand Corporation. They were headquartered in Indianapolis for a while. I would love to talk to Pickett. If anybody from her campaign is listening, we will reach out either way. I'm interested to hear about that time in her career. Moving on down to the 6th District. This is the south and east suburbs of Indianapolis. Greenfield, Newcastle, Columbus, and Richmond also all in this district, and this was another clown show. Greg Pence is retiring to go hang with his, hang out with his brother Mike. Former Indianapolis mayoral candidate Jefferson Shreve won this race with 28%, defeating Indiana State Rep Mike Speedy from the 90th District and State Senator Jeff Ratz of the 27th Senate District in this primary. Those guys complete MAGA clowns. At least I will say this for Shreve. Everybody I know who knows Shreve says he's a nice guy. He's a Republican, but he's not a crazy MAGA Republican. However, all of Central Indiana is completely tired of hearing his voice and seeing his face. This dude's ads have been on our TVs for a couple years now. He was the Republican nominee for mayor of Indianapolis last year and spent over $5.5 million of his self-storage fortune flooding TV airwaves and podcast airwaves and radio airwaves with ads. He dropped another $1.3 million on this race. Like I said, at least he beat Rats, who is a notorious anti-trans bigot, school privatizer, believer of the litter box meme, book banner, and CRT nitwit. Shreve will surely pepper the ads with more airwaves in his November race with Cindy Worth, whom Pence defeated by 35 points in 2022. She's the Democratic nominee once again for this seat. Also, James Siniak, Libertarian, will be on the ballot. I'll tell you, if the Indiana Democratic Party had any resources, which we don't, but if we were getting good help from, our no billionaire benefactors, which the Republicans seem to have plenty of, might not be a bad idea to boost the profile of the Libertarians and see if they can't take a chunk out of the Republican supermajority. But alas, this is wishful thinking. I want to move on down to the 8th district here. That is a super, super huge, mostly rural district, which also contains Evansville, Jasper, Vincennes, Terre Haute, stretches all the way up to Fountain County and Covington up there. We got another retirement. Larry Bouchon is out. And there is a gaggle of Republicans trying to catch a ride on that sweet, sweet congressional insider trading and write your own tax code gravy train. 8 of them in all. Eventually, State Senator Mark Messmer out of Jasper, the 48th Senate District, comes out ahead there, pulling almost 40%, defeating former Representative John Hostetler, as well as former Trump staffer Dominic Kavanaugh and frequent Bouchon primary challenger Richard Moss. Messmer is a forced birth extremist radical Catholic and lists 4 issues on his campaign website, quote-unquote pro-life being number 1. We all know they only mean pro-forced birth. Fuck that kid after they're born, am I right? Second issue, cryptocurrency? Something smells fishy there. Cryptocurrency is a scam. Third issue, Israel. Messmer, a big recipient of help from AIPAC, the massive far right-wing pro-Israel group who dabbles in democratic politics far too often. They were big supporters of Messmer. Hostetler has been accused of anti-Semitism for using the dual loyalty trope and referring to a certain Jewish element in the George W. Bush administration. Not nice ways to frame things there, buddy. We are frequent critics of the state of Israel and their far right-wing government and their disregard for human rights in Palestine. But there's different ways to go at it, my guy. Anyway, Messmer's final issue is the Mexican border, which Indiana has miles and miles of. Now, the Democrat in this race is interesting, and I hadn't heard of this guy before, but I am super excited to reach out to Eric Hurt, who won a 4-way race with 45%. Also, somebody get this man a better website, but for what it lacks in style, these policies, this is what I'm talking about. This is how Indiana Democrats should talk. Look at this dude's plank. A, workers' rights. He supports a $20 minimum wage with automatic cost of living adjustments, 6 weeks guaranteed paid vacation, 16 weeks of guaranteed parental leave. And these all sound like a lot, but they're not in, like, you know, Europe or countries that value their citizens. Also a supporter of a 32-hour work week. Union guy, organized labor guy, love it. Environment, climate change should be a top priority. Doesn't want to just focus on more renewables, but also reducing demand. Wants to invest heavily in public transportation and create a national rail service. And I tell you, you start talking trains, and I get like the Vince McMahon meme. I get very excited. Sorry to invoke that guy. He's a total monster. Great meme, though. Taxing the rich. He's got a whole plank on supporting a top marginal tax rate of 80%, which puts us right in line with the New Deal era. That's right where we should be. Supports a wealth tax and a windfall profits tax to fight corporate price gouging and shrinkflation. Love it. You guys hearing this? You guys hearing this? This is what I'm talking about. Education. Believes that all school meals should be free across the board. Supports universal pre-K, universal community college, and debt-free 4-year universities. Supports the immediate cancellation of student loan debt and teaching honest history. Believes we should tackle crime by tackling the root causes, not by criminalizing poverty. He supports moving funds from traditional policing into education and healthcare, substance abuse counseling, and social services. Supports the federal legalization of marijuana, a ban on for-profit prisons, and the decriminalization of sex work. This guy's pro-democracy, pro-choice, pro-LGBTQ rights, and for single-payer health care. Willing to call the siege on Gaza what it is. This is the kind of unapologetic leftism that gets me excited. Unfortunately, I am not in that district. I do not get to vote for Eric Hurt in my district. Indiana 9th District Republican Congresswoman Erin Houchin, my rep, easily dispatched her primary opponent. You know, she acts like a moderate, but willfully bends the knee to Trumpism. She's election denial curious. And we're going to counter that with Democrat Tim Peck. In the fall, he defeated Liam Doris. Liam Doris is a Bloomington guy and a Democratic socialist, and I really wanted him to get to come on the show. We couldn't quite get either of these guys. And it's not so much that I have a problem with Peck. I mean, he says the right things on his website, and he, says the right things in general, but I don't like that the 9th District Dems put their thumbs on the scale and endorsed a candidate in the primary. You don't do that. You let the voters decide. Number 2, Peck just looks smug, and I know, like, that's your face. You can't help it. but boy, like, I don't know. He just gives off a bro vibe that I don't know how well that's going to, fly in southeastern Indiana. His campaign culture isn't great from what I've heard. Little birdies have said he's had walkouts. And he doesn't really stand for much of anything. You saw that detailed policy list from our candidate in the 8th. In the 9th, Peck, boy, he says a lot of words, but doesn't seem to actually stand for anything. And yet, I will still vote for him because Erin Houchin carries water for fascists. I'd at least like, yeah, Aaron, if you're going to wear the armband, to wear it loud and proud so we know where you stand. That concludes our trip through the congressional races. Finally, let's look at the statewide races. Now, speaking of people who proudly wear the armband, to replace Mike Braun, Republicans cleared the field for insurrectionist-loving MAGA toady Jim Banks. They fought tooth and nail to prevent a contested primary to keep John Rust off the ballot. John Rust is a southern Indiana egg farmer running as the centrist in this race. Again, Rust is not our friend, but he did point out a lot of Banks's flaws. I've talked about how extreme Banks is. Got a whole good rant on him, I think, in last week's episode. Go listen to that. Perennial libertarian candidate Andrew Horning is also in this race. This is his second run for United States Senate. He's run twice for governor and 5 times for Congress as a libertarian nominee. But this is an important race. And Banks is uniquely dangerous. He is well-funded, has the power of the whole Trump faction of the GOP behind him. And that's why I think it's exceptionally disappointing how the Democrats in their race were hung out to dry. I'll tell you, I've said this to other people, this should have been Pete Buttigieg running in this seat, right? Pete, you're a national profile candidate. You're a Hoosier. This should have been you. I think he was afraid to lose a statewide race potentially, and I don't blame him for fucking off to Michigan. Seems like a much more friendly environment for a couple gay men to raise their lovely family. But boy, that would have been a matchup I'd like to see. Pete taking on Jim Banks. So this primary was on the Democratic side was between a couple lesser-known candidates, Mark Carmichael and Dr. Valerie McRae. And I got to talk to both of them. Both lovely, lovely people. I can't encourage you enough to go back. That's the last 2 episodes of the show. It's, I want to say, 33 and 34. But these are campaigns for United States Senate, and you could just tell they were operating on a shoestring budget. I say we need the National Party. We need people with money to believe in Indiana. We are not a red state. We are a purple state. I've heard us described as a purple state with a voter turnout problem. Yes, but it's mostly a purple state because we have a hopelessness problem. And I talked about it at the top of the show. A long, long time of Republican rule makes us feel beaten down. And so, Mark Carmichael, lovely guy. Like I said, so generous with his time. We had technical difficulties. He was super, super helpful trying to get back with me and get, re-recording if necessary, trying to get things right. And again, I appreciate that immensely. But, I mean, who am I? I'm nobody. I shouldn't be running through tech support directly with a candidate for United States Senate myself, right? Like, where's the staffers? Where's the campaign organization? Dr. McRae ran a little more organized campaign. I feel like I at least had to go through a gatekeeper to get to her. And yes, it is historic that Dr. McRae is the first Black woman to run for statewide office here in Indiana, to run for United States Senate. And that's great. That is awesome. But I think more importantly, the identity that really matters here in this race is her identity as a clinical psychologist, because she understands, I think, the moment that we're in. 40 years of Reaganism, 40 years of neoliberalism is emotional aggression. It is emotional abuse, psychological abuse directed at the population. And, we do feel beaten down and atomized and hopeless. Friend of the pod, and sorry to keep, touting this guy so much, but I love his work. Jared Yates Sexton, Hoosier author, is currently working on writing a book about the mental health crisis in this country, and the politics of mental health. And he gets things, and I think she gets things. And, authoritarianism is like part of the human condition, and it pops up every several generations in times of hopelessness like these. Certain desperate people want the strong man to come in and fix things, right? 40 years of unrestrained capitalism, we have a hard time telling the difference between truth and lies anymore, because lies are more profitable, and frankly, I'd like to see Dr. McRae, psychoanalyze Banks. What's wrong with this dude? He's a little bully, right? Like, who hurt you, Jim Banks? Why are you the way you are? Patronize this little man. Anyway, that's my 2 cents for Dr. McRae, who probably doesn't need them. I do want to give a quick mention to the presidential primary in Indiana. Obviously, Trump and Biden are on course for a rematch here in November. Biden was uncontested. Now, in the Republican primary, Nikki Haley was still on the ballot. Now, she dropped out in March, but with printing timelines and whatnot, she was still on the ballot. And I'll tell you, she pulled almost 22%, which is a huge amount of dissent from Republicans in this state, which is considered very Trumpy, right? Like, she's been out since March. This is a zombie campaign, and, Republicans in the state have already voted for one dead woman this cycle, but there are a population of disaffected Republicans out there. I don't know why they still call themselves Republicans. The party's completely been owned by Trump, but there's groups out there maybe trying to push a more moderate Republican message in Indiana. One place it did not make a dent with the moderate message is in the governor's race, which is the final race we will cover here today, and its end is welcome respite for television viewers in central Indiana, for sure. I can attest to that, and I'm sure the rest of the state has a similar story. Man, those commercials. Good to have a break for a couple months before they come back in force after Labor Day. So in the governor's race, Libertarian Donald Rainwater is back. He did receive 11% of the vote last time, which is a strong showing for a third-party candidate. The Democrats candidate was uncontested. That's Dr. Jennifer McCormick. We got a chance to talk to her. I like her a lot. I know she's a former Republican, but I don't think she was much of a political Republican, just somebody who put an R next to her name. She was an educator, you know, she was a state superintendent, got there and saw what state Republicans actually were about and didn't really like what she saw. Don't blame her. We'll be going to bat for Dr. McCormick here in the fall, but man, that is an underdog campaign. She's got a massive, massive money deficit she's going to have to be working against here. I would panhandle outside of Deb Simon's mansion if I were her. So much money in that Republican primary. Half the contestants were self-funded multi-millionaires. But only one of those guys has the clout of being a sitting United States senator. So let's go through those results here in this race in reverse order. The 6-person Republican field in the 6th. Curtis Hill, former Attorney General. Bye, Felicia. You're done. Your statewide elected career is over. Assault allegations, sexual assault allegations against Curtis Hill got him ousted as candidate for re-election back in 2022, and a 6th place finish here has him, you know, licking the wounds. 5th place finisher Jamie Rittenauer took him to school, homeschool, Christian homeschool, with her with her campaign finishing in 5th. Just a little shoestring thing. Raging Christian nationalist, still beat Curtis Hill. Now, in 4th place, Eric Doden's family lit a ton of money on fire to finish 4th with slightly less than 12%. You know, this guy tried to run in the traditional Republican lane, just maybe a little more religious, like, you know, Jesus plays in my foursome. But essentially, he's the same guy as 3rd place finisher Brad Chambers, who finished with 17.5%. You know, he tried to, like, cut this image as a centrist, as a moderate. His stated policies on everything are typical Republican bullshit, but, you know, he speaks softly, right? And seems like a decent, nice guy. What I'm really interested in there is where his donors go, because there are a handful of very wealthy donors that supported Chambers in this race who have been known to contribute to Democrats when the Republican is an extreme candidate, because, you know, it turns out business people know that driving all of the educated people out of state isn't good business. And there was that a group called Recenter Indiana was involved in this race a little bit, trying to maybe get Democrats to pull Republican primary tickets to vote for the centrist. Obviously, doesn't seem like there was a huge appetite for that, because I don't really know how much further right the center could be. Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch finished 2nd in this race, 21, almost 22%. Just solid establishment organizing. You know, a lot of the party establishment was behind her. You know, if the anti-MAGA faction of the party had consolidated behind her, she's pretty Trumpy, but, or, you know, Chambers or Doden, instead of them all lighting all of this money on fire. If they had consolidated their vote, maybe this thing's a race. At least our local TV affiliates are happy. I'm sure they made bank beaming all of those shitty commercials directly into our eyeballs. But as expected, Mike Braun won this race with nearly 40% of the vote. MAGA Mike ran on being Trump's biggest bootlicker, ran on the southern border again, which, you know, Indiana's got miles and miles of, right? And ran on being tough on China and anti-woke. He didn't offer any policy. None. He just offered, I'm Mike Braun, you know my name, I'm the guy in the blue shirt, vote for me. I love Trump, Trump loves me. We're a MAGA family. Terrible. And yeah, that guy, MAGA Mike Braun. By the way, do you know why Braun's running for governor and not running for re-election in the Senate? He's basically on double secret probation from running for federal office ever again. It's so many campaign finance violations in 2018 in his first go round that he's basically been told, sir, you can't run for federal office anymore. And so he's running for state office. So I'm told. People are saying, right? Braun's suggested running mate is first-term state representative Julie McGuire. She represents parts of Marion County. In 2022, she unseated former Republican state rep John Jacob, who was so extreme on abortion that he pissed off other Republicans, if you can imagine. But Indiana's weird, which I didn't need to tell you, but it's weird in a way you probably didn't know, in that he doesn't really get to pick his own running mate. He can suggest a running mate, and he has, but lieutenant governor candidates, as well as attorney general candidates in both parties, are chosen at their state party convention. And Braun's chosen candidate, McGuire, will be facing a weird lieutenant governor campaign opponent in Micah Beckwith, who is often referred to in media as a ultra-conservative pastor, but he is not conservative. He is radical. He is a proud Christian nationalist. He looks like Fred Durst and sounds like Jerry Falwell. This guy is an affront to the First Amendment, an affront to our founding fathers, an affront to the freedom of religion. And can you imagine Mike Braun and Micah Beckwith on a ticket together? It's like MAGA dream world falling into place. This is what we're dealing with. Like, these are the stakes. We're talking about liberal democracy itself in Indiana and in our country. You know, the wrong choices at just a couple more forks in the road will lead us to full Christian fascism, and I am not being hyperbolic. You know, we are beaten down. We've suffered single-party Republican rule in this state for far too long, and the National Party isn't coming in with money, and Biden's shit the bed on Israel, and now Democrats have to spend to defend states they won in 2020, so we're definitely not getting help. So if we're not getting help, we're real underdogs. We gotta shoot big, you know? Quit half-assing things. Quit being diet Republicans. Quit being Republican light. Stand for something. If they're going to call us commies anyway, we might as well stand for some real progressive values. If Indiana Democrats want to climb out from under supermajority rule, we're going to have to do this ourselves, right? I know we're out there. I know you're out there. And I'm going to yell about it from now until November. We have got to turn out everybody we know to the polls. But that is not enough, right? It is necessary, but not sufficient. We have to donate. We have to volunteer. We have to organize. The cities, we need you to show up. Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, South Bend, Evansville, Lafayette, Bloomington. The region, we need you. Kentuckiana, we need you. The suburbs are going to be huge this year. And they're already turning. But it's time to back up that in this house side, right? Real action. What kind of country do we want to live in? Are you willing to give up a modicum of comfort so that others might have a chance? You know, what's the price of our humanity? Well, we started local. We zoomed all the way out to philosophical. Thanks for listening. Share with a friend. How about one of those friends that you're going to take to the polls in November? You can find me on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at HoosLeft, and on most other social media sites at ScottRodge78. If you want to reach me, send me a note, send me a DM on the socials, or email me at scottrodge78@gmail.com. If you haven't yet done so, when you're finished here, go to scottaaronrogers.substack.com and subscribe at the paid level. Help me keep this project going. Until next time, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.